Welcome to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel Jackson. And in this space, we do life together, we grow together, and we heal together. And sometimes that leads to a change of heart. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel, and yes, I know we're doing another audio only one. I have not really been feeling well, and so here we are, okay? It's like we're gonna get it out or not. So bear with me as I'm still working on getting videos out as well. But today we are going to be talking about how it is not too late. And I feel like a lot of times we don't start things, we don't do things because we feel like we missed the opportunity. We feel like it's too late when in reality, you can very much so still do it. And so we're going to talk about that today. But first, girl, let me tell you something. So, what actually inspired today's topic is this little journey that I'm on. I always have these spurts of I want to eat right, I want to be healthy, all of those things. And as I am getting older, as I am approaching my 40s, I do want to make sure that I'm like really taking care of my temple. I want to make sure that I have energy, that I feel strong, and also just to combat a lot of different health issues. A lot of things that run in my family are not necessarily things that are hereditary or genetic. It really is about lifestyle changes. And so I'm trying to be mindful of that and get ahead of it because I want to make sure that I am taking care of my body to the best of my ability. So with that, finally decided to join a gym. I joined an all women's gym, and listen, y'all, I really love this gym because I went to they have like different classes that you can sign up for. And so I did a walk it out class the other day, and listen, it was 21 of us in there. I was for sure the youngest one in there. And baby, when I tell you all of those women were probably retired, or if not retired, very close to retirement, they were up in here getting it. It was giving Gilmore Girls goes to the gym, and I love that for them. And it really inspired me because these older women were out there getting it. And some of them, they're a little slower, they were struggling, but they were really committed to their health. You can tell that some of them, this is a lifestyle for them. And it just, as I was watching them and as I was doing the workout, it really just reminded me that it's not too late. It's not too late to start your health journey. It's not too late to start your spiritual journey. It's not too late to start your business. It's not too late to start your mental health journey. It's not too late to prioritize taking care of you. And so I want to talk about that today. So first things first, something that I feel like is really necessary to address when you are feeling like it's too late, you've missed the opportunity, you've missed the moment, is to give yourself permission to be free from the thoughts and opinions of people. So many of us are struggling with what people think, and we don't even realize that that is something that is hindering us in pursuing certain things, in growing in our purpose, in actually being who we want to be, because we have so much concern of what people are going to think. So I know I talk about her a lot, but I was listening to Miss Kev on Stage podcast, Gin and Juice, with her sister, and one of the things she talked about was how in therapy, her therapist essentially was encouraging her to show more of her true authentic self. And she told her she felt like that was a place of tension for her because she didn't feel like people would be receptive to it because they've only seen her in a certain light. And so she felt like to show up as her authentic self would ultimately make people feel like this isn't who you are, because they haven't seen it. And it's so interesting because something that she said was when she started to post more content that was more true to who she actually is, someone commented on it saying something along the lines of this feels like you're trying to be someone else. This doesn't even feel like who you you are. And she's like, exactly. Like, thank you for reinforcing what I was already feeling, but like, this is who I am. And I find that very interesting because a lot of times we are not able to show up as our authentic selves because we are so concerned about the thoughts and opinions of how other people are going to receive it, how other people are going to take it. And we don't even realize that as a result of that, it's not even just a matter of you shrinking, but you also put yourself into a box that says, I can only do this, or I can only be this, based off of how receptive people are to it. And so many of us stay stuck in that cycle for years, for decades, because we don't even realize how bound we are to the thoughts and opinions of people. And catch this, something I've had to learn for myself is you can be freed from people pleasing, yet also still be bound by people's thoughts and opinions. What do I mean by this? You can be freed from people pleasing in the sense of, you're confident in your no. I shared that a few episodes ago. You can be confident in your no. You can be able to establish boundaries with people, but you can also be in a space where you very much so minimize and shrink and allow yourself to be ruled by the thoughts and opinions of people. And a lot of times when that happens, it's also a result of us being very self-critical ourselves. Let's call a thing a thing. That's what I should have called this podcast. Let's call a thing a thing. Because sometimes you carry the thoughts and opinions of people so heavily because you're very critical of people. You're very critical of yourself. And so it's hard for you to be able to release that component of yourself. So you carry the thoughts and opinions of so many other people. This is a season where we have to be free from people. I can't stress that enough. And as I'm sharing this with you, I'm also sharing it with myself because I realize I always say I share a lot. There is a lot of me that I am transparent about, that I am open about. There are a lot of things that I feel comfortable sharing. And there are ways that I show up online that I don't necessarily show up in person. And it's not a thing of hypocrisy. You're a completely different person online than you are in person. It's not that. It's more so of I've come to a point where I very much so compartmentalize people, places, and things. So there's a certain way that I may show up that I'm showing up in this way because I don't know you like that. And because I don't know you like that, I'm not going to give you my fullness. There are spaces, people and places actually, that I may not fully show up as Angel. It's interesting because a lot of people feel like I'm quiet and shy, and it's like I'm not. I just don't show up the same in all spaces. And in some instances, it is a thing of me shrinking. I will acknowledge that 100%, but I'm very much so the type of person, I got to feel a room out. I got to see what you about. I got to see who you are. Like I definitely have to feel the room out. But I can genuinely say there are 3 spaces that I feel like I am my authentic self and or closest to my authentic self. The body. The podcast is one of those spaces where I definitely feel like I show up as my closest to my authentic self. There's still a little bit of restraint there because this is a somewhat of a space of professionalism. And so I'm not going to let it all hang out. But I'm aware also that as I'm sharing certain things online, this is a public space. This is a space where any and everybody can listen to it. So yes, I am going to be mindful, more mindful than I would be in other spaces. In my core friend groups, I feel like I am able to show up as my authentic self. In my relationship, I feel like I'm able to show up as my authentic self. And a part of that is because I have built those relationships with those people that it's like, I can fully be me. And I know there's no judgment there. I know that you can see me for who I am. Taking away all that I do, all that I've done, removing all of that, you can see me for just as who I am. And that's okay. The thing that I have learned is a lot of times when we struggle with being our authentic selves, or we struggle with showing up as who we actually are and pursuing the things and doing the things that we're supposed to, the struggle is that we have not always taken the time to feel out people and we have given people more of ourselves than we should have. And I'm not saying this to say that you need to be guarded, that you need to be secretive, that you need to be super private. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is you need to use discernment for who you give yourself to. And I don't even solely mean that in a relationship sense. I mean that in a general sense. There are going to be people who you have relationships with, but those relationships are not the same across the board. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that at times we can feel like all of our relationships serve the same purpose. And so we have to show up in the same ways. Absolutely not. My friends actually sent me an Instagram post recently that I'll actually insert that in here. I'll figure out how to insert that in here, and then we're going to come back and talk about that.
Hey girl, I hope by now you've learned to put your friends in different categories to save yourself from further disappointment. But if not, I'm here to help. Because a friendship breakup can hurt worse than a romantic one. So let's talk about it. Now your first category is an acquaintance. These are very surface level people you've met maybe through a friend of a friend, you casually cross paths at an event, or maybe y'all follow each other on social media. You don't really know much about them, but you like what they represent. Y'all are both rooting for each other, and when you see them, it's all love and good vibes. That is level 1, an acquaintance. Then you have one step above that, the associate. These are friends you built a bond with through experiences together. For example, you've worked together, were in the same class in school, or maybe you met at the gym. This is usually someone you're compatible enough to go to dinner with or happy hour, maybe grab some lunch or a coffee. And when you're in their presence, they always feel very familiar because of the experiences you went through together. Y'all are really cool, and they probably know a lot about you because of all the stories you mutually exchanged in the setting that you met in. For example, I've had colleagues that I was real cool with. We knew each other's life story, but at the same time, we wouldn't like call each other in an emergency. It's a weird dynamic, but you need friends like that. These are the type of people that bring value because they help you function at work or whatever setting you met in. So many of my old coworkers kept me saying. So that is level 2, an associate. And then we have level 3, your girls. Or you can call them your close friends because some of them might be guys. These are your really dependable friends, your dogs. The ones that always show up for you and are intentional about keeping you in their lives. These people should be the ones who pray for you, they intercede for you, and you trust their judgment because they have your best interest at heart. You are intentional about spending time with them. Y'all never mind planning around each other's busy schedules because you truly care about each other. They hold you accountable, they tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. They always give you sound advice and they hold a safe space for you. Again, these are your girls or your close friends. Then we have level 4, which is your highest level of support. This is your best friend, your BFF, your ride or die, the one who knows where all the bodies are buried. This is the person you can tell anything to without fear of judgment. You can be your crazy, weird, complete self around them, the person that you are most compatible with. You never have to second guess their intentions. Y'all communicate so effortlessly. This is pretty much your twin flame in friendship form. If it's been a while since you last spoke because you're both busy, whenever you do catch up, you just pick up where you left off. It's never any awkwardness or weird energy. You two just get each other. So I said all that to say, when it comes to navigating through adult friendships, know who you are talking to. This will save you so much disappointment and hurt along the way. Don't go seeking support or help from a close friend that should have been demoted to an associate a long time ago. And when something happens with an associate, don't get upset because maybe they should have been left as an acquaintance. So I want you to start praying specifically for discernment so that you can know what categories to put people in to preserve your peace. Remember, you can do all of this and still end up disappointed, but that's just life. The point of this is to mitigate the risk. Love you, girl. Bye.
I think that is one of the best ways to describe how you view different people in your life. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that. But some of us have ended up shrinking. We have ended up allowing the weight of people's thoughts and opinions to weigh so heavily on us because we have misidentified their role and their place in our lives. And as a result of that, we end up carrying the thoughts and opinions of someone, and it becomes a weight and a burden to us because you misidentified a person's role in your life. And now you're allowing their words, their thoughts, their opinions to carry more weight than it ever should have based on their role in your life. I think that it is important, and I think that it is necessary to have people who can speak into you. And when I say speak into you, that does not just mean compliment you. That does not just mean tell you when you're doing everything right or when you're doing everything good. These are also people who can challenge you. These are also people who can hold you accountable. These are also people who can tell you, I don't know if that really makes sense right now, and you're able to be receptive of that. The problem is we have allowed ourselves to have too many voices in our thoughts that now we don't know what is the right path, what is the wrong path, because we're carrying so much pressure of people. And we need to be free from people in this season. There are so many of you who feel like you can't do the thing that you were supposed to do in 2020 because it's now 2024 and people have told you it's too late. People have told you that you missed the mark. People have told you you missed the opportunity. You're not going to be able to do it. People don't care anymore. Listen to me when I say this. People will always have an opinion, but God has the final say. And that's on period, okay? God will always have the final say. Sometimes we make the mistake of consulting people and we end up staying stuck or staying in a position that we were supposed to be out of years ago because we rested on the word from a person versus listening to what God had to say, listening to what God has told us. And there are people who have good intentions and miss the mark in the sense of giving you advice. Yes, that happens. But there's also people who they don't want to see you succeed. They don't want to see you further along than they are. There's also people who can't understand how you're able to do something because they haven't done it. And so because it didn't work for them, they're telling you that it can't work for you. There is a different level of grace that is established when you are called to something. There is a different level of grace and favor that rests upon your life when you are actually called and purposed to a thing. Yes, maybe it didn't work out for that person, maybe because it wasn't supposed to. Like maybe that's not what they're called to. But you have to understand that when God has actually put a calling on your life, when he has purposed you for something, there is a grace that you can walk in that someone who does not have that same purpose or that same calling, it's not the same. And that doesn't make you better than by any means, but it also doesn't mean that because it didn't work for someone else or because it was too late for someone else, that does not apply to you. So I need you to understand that it's time to really allow yourself to be free from the thoughts of people and to allow yourself to stop caring what other people are going to think, what they're going to say, how they're going to feel about something. Do what you need to do. Stand 10 toes down on it. Stand on business, as they say. Do what you're supposed to do. And don't allow yourself to carry the what ifs, what they going to think, what they going to say. People are always going to have something to say, y'all. They will always, 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 always have something to say. Be who you're supposed to be. Do what you're supposed to do. Be who you were created to be, regardless, because they're going to talk anyways. The next thing that I want to talk about let me preface it with this. This one's going to be heavier, okay? But I think it's necessary because one of the things that has kept a lot of people from going forward, following their purpose, doing what they're supposed to, is the weight of shame. And this is important to talk about because so many of you have allowed the guilt and the shame and even the condemnation that is associated with your past, things that you've done, things that have happened to you, things that failed, things that fell through. You have allowed that to be like this cloud that just hangs over you of shame. And I was listening to it wasn't a sermon. It was a video by Stephanie K. I think it's Okafor. I think that's her married last name. I'll link it in the show notes and description box. But she was talking about self-deliverance. And one of the things that she talked about was how a lot of times in an army situation, when you are at war, if the chief is taken out, essentially, then the rest of the army will bow down. And she said something along the lines of that she sensed for a lot of people that shame is like the chief spirit, essentially, that they need to be delivered from. And once you deal with that, everything else will essentially be dealt with, because most of the things that you're struggling with, shame is what is at the root of it. And I know for a lot of you, there have been different things that have just happened throughout life. And for us who are believers, that can very well be before we were believers as well as after we were believers. We've all had a past. We've all had things that we have struggled with. But for a lot of us, even though we may no longer do those things anymore, or even though we may have repented, or we may have given that to God, we still are bound by shame. We feel guilty about it. We have this just heavy weight of shame that continues to just loom there, even if you may not be aware. And when we look up the actual definition of shame, because y'all know I'm a definition girl, I like to see exactly what it means. It's a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. And I don't know about anybody else, but I have indeed engaged in some wrong and foolish behavior that has left the burden and weight of shame. And as I was listening to the message by Stephanie, I did not realize that I had an area of shame that I was carrying until she said, one of the ways to help you walk in the freedom from shame is to tell someone about whatever the issue is, whatever the thing is that you're experiencing the shame about, to tell someone about it. And when she said tell somebody, this ain't go and like make a YouTube video necessarily, depending on what the topic is. If you feel led to, go ahead, girl. But more so like tell someone who you trust, tell someone that you can, talk to, it's a space of confidentiality. It's a space where that you can share and it's non-judgmental. And when she said that, I just remember this feeling of like, ooh, I don't want to do that. And even just the thought of that reinforced the fact that there's shame that I need to be freed from. And it's interesting because for a lot of us, we don't realize how much us shrinking, how much us wanting to hide, how much of us wanting to play in the background is a result of us needing to be freed from shame. And there are so many taboo topics that we feel uncomfortable to talk about. There's so many topics that we feel embarrassed to talk about that we struggle with. And it's just interesting because a lot of times, once you actually start to talk about those things and you share those things, there's so many people who are like, oh my God, girl, me too. Like, why didn't we talk about it? It's always a why didn't we talk about this? But the spirit of shame wants to make you feel like you're the only person who is struggling with this. You are the only person that is fighting with this thing. You are the only person who has gone through this. Nobody's going to understand. You are alone. And that is the furthest from the truth. And that's how it keeps you trapped. So many of you feel like it's too late because you have allowed shame to convince you of that. And you are carrying around this weight of this garment almost. It's like, have you ever put on someone's coat that's too big for you? That's what it's like to carry shame. You're carrying this garment of shame around, embarrassed about the things that you've gone through, embarrassed about the things that have happened to you. And you end up allowing yourself to say, I'm not worthy enough to do this, or I'm not qualified enough to do this. No one is going to understand. I feel like I'm alone. People are going to judge me. People are going to feel like I'm unworthy. People are going to feel like I'm dirty. People are going to judge me. And you carry this inside and you don't even realize how that allows you to remain bound to shame and condemnation, because God has already said you set free. God has already allowed you to be free. But what the spirit of shame does, it makes you feel like you're still bound, even though you have the option of freedom. It makes you feel like you can't get out of this. It makes you feel like you're deserving to feel like this because of your actions or because of something that happened to you. And that is the furthest from the truth. And so many of us are not able to be our authentic selves. We're not able to walk in the fullness of who God created us to be, or to be our authentic selves, because we have allowed ourselves to carry around shame that makes us feel like I need to hide. I need to be quiet. I don't need to share this story because people are going to think X, Y, or Z. And this goes back to me saying the need to be free from people. I might have to change the title of this episode to something about being free, but I just think it's so important for us to be able to identify that. And let me say this, I can understand how there are situations where you may feel like, I don't want to tell anybody about this. I don't want to talk to anybody about this. People know, my friends don't know, my family don't know, whatever it might be. I respect that. I understand that. But let me say this, I will open myself up to be available to anybody who needs to share something. You can email me, you can DM me. Email is changeheartsquestions@gmail.com. I'll be sure to link that. Or you can DM me on Instagram at @angelsharon_. This will always be a safe space. And I mean that to a T. I work in a job that is very big on confidentiality, but more importantly, I understand how, one, I know how it feels to share something vulnerably and then have it repeated. I know how that feels, and it does not feel good, but I also know how challenging and difficult it is to share something that is extremely vulnerable and to have that confidence broken. And it makes you feel like, I'm not going to tell anybody anything. And I don't want anyone to be in that space, because what that ultimately does is it reinforces the shame. It reinforces you being bound. But the more you start talking about it, the more you are able to open up and share it with people, like I said, that you can trust. There may come a time where you can make a YouTube video about it. Absolutely go for it. There may be a time where you want to make a reel. Go for it. Talk about it on the podcast. But I can also understand that there's a time where you are mindful that it's a sensitive and vulnerable subject and you're not yet ready to make it public. That's okay. Some things don't ever have to be public. But I do want to encourage you to allow yourself to be free from shame by talking about things, by sharing things. And there are things that I may end up talking about eventually, but something that I've committed to is starting with my inner circle and sharing those things with my inner circle and building my way up. If it's something that needs to be said publicly, all right, God, we can do that. But for right now, for me, mine is talking to my inner circle. So maybe yours is also talking to your inner circle and knowing like, that's okay. That's a safe space. Just getting it out, because the longer you allow it to stay in your mind, the longer you allow it to stay in your heart, that thing will eat at your spirit, and it will allow you to remain in a place where you are always shrinking because you feel too embarrassed or shameful about whatever is attached to your story. I know there's a girl that I know, and I don't feel like I'm sharing her business because she shared it like publicly before, but she has been very open about the fact that she struggled with pornography. And it's interesting that as women, that's not something that a lot of women talk about, but it's a struggle, but it's happening. And as she was able to share that, other people other women specifically are like, oh my God, me too. And I've been afraid to tell anybody. This is why, one, we need community, but this is also why it helps us to break that wall of shame, to break that wall that keeps us bound, because it helps us to know that we're not alone, but also so that we can be free from the weight of shame. All right, the last thing that I want to talk about with it not being too late is understanding that even if you started at some point and you stopped, understand that just because the hype may have died down doesn't mean that the dream has died. And I know for some of you, and myself included, there have been times where it's like I've made an announcement or I've had something that was going on and it seems like there was all of this hype around it. Everybody's super excited. And then it just seems like it falls off. And then you're like, so how do I pick this up? Where is it done with? Like, where do we start? Listen here. Just because the hype died down, that does not mean the dream has died. You can still start the hype up again if you need to. You can still start something new. You can revisit it. Don't sleep on your ability to be able to pull something back from the archives, okay? Don't sleep on your ability to be able to go back to something that you may have done in 2020 and revive that thing. Because we can feel like we missed an opportunity because we feel like the hype of it is gone. Get it back up. Start it back again. If you wrote a book 10 years ago and you still believe in that book and you still stand on that book, bring it back. Sell it again. Ain't nothing wrong with that. As you can see, all of this ties in together because ultimately it boils down back to being free from people. That's what I need to call this episode. Be free from people. Because at the end of the day, it's always that thought of, well, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? It wasn't successful then, so how is it going to be successful now? We just find ourselves like going back and forth. And I need you to understand that you getting the hype back up, wherever it might be, there's never going to feel like it's an opportune time. It's never going to feel like there's an opportune time. It's never going to feel like everybody's going to be on board. It's never going to be a scenario where it feels like the perfect timing or it feels like it makes perfect sense. Remove the thought of perfect, because perfect don't exist, okay? Perfect exists in movies and movies alone. Movies and sitcoms, that's it. Don't worry about perfect. Worry about being in God's timing. Worry about being in God's positioning. That's what we need to be worried about for real, because you can miss it because you were not in God's timing. That's a whole different thing. But some of us, we feel like we're missing it because we're chasing perfection. Absolutely. You're going to miss that thing every single time. Get perfect out of your mind. We're not striving for perfection. We're striving for authenticity, and we're striving for being in the will of God, because I don't want to miss it because I'm over here chasing perfection. And God's like, right now is when I want you to do it. And you over here trying to make it perfect and you're missing it. But I'm telling you, just start. Just do it. Just go for it. I want to encourage you all, as you are thinking about the last 6 months of this year, as we're getting ready to come up on June, I want you to think about, forget what you didn't do in the first half of the year. We passed that. It is what it is at this point. What is it that you feel like you have a burning passion, desire that I have to do this thing? I don't know where to start. I don't know what I'm doing, but I have to do this thing. Whatever that is, start asking God to give you guidance. Ask him to give you instruction. Ask him to help you to be freed from whatever you need to be free from, so that when you do start to pursue it, you're not carrying around the mindset of someone who is bound. You're operating in the mindset of a woman who is free, who is whole. And understand this. I'm not saying, I have to be clear about this. I'm not saying you have to be perfect before you can start. Because I know someone heard that and felt like, well, I'm still working on being whole. I'm still working on being free. We're all a work in progress. You can be working on being free and still pursuing purpose. God is in that too. Don't miss that. But be working towards something. Be working towards your wholeness. Be working from being free from people. Be working towards being free from shame. As you're working towards that, God's going to give you instruction for things. He's going to start opening the doors and showing you, all right, this is your next step. This is your next instruction. He will give you the clarity that you need. Run at your pace. Run your race at your pace. Don't focus on what everyone else is doing, what it looked like for everybody else. There was someone who, her and I, our stories were always kind of similar. So if something happened for her, it tended to happen for me like a couple of months later, a year later, whatever it might be, and vice versa. And something happened for her that did not happen for me. And I struggled with that for a while because I felt like, what am I doing wrong? What did I miss? And God had to show me, yes, there were times where you all had similar things that were happening at the same time or happening one after the other. But at the end of the day, your race is your race and her race is her race. It's not going to be the same, and that's okay. The outcome's not going to be the same. The inner work is not going to be the same. That's okay. But run your race. Don't compare it to someone else, and don't try to copy what someone else is doing to try to use that as your blueprint. You got this. You're doing great, sweetie. You're doing amazing, and you're going to be fine. Everything's fine. All right. I hope you all have an amazing week. Don't forget to share this with a girlfriend. And until next time, don't forget, be whole, be healed, and be authentic. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to A Change of Heart podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and please take a moment to share with a girlfriend. Also, I'd love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram at @AngelSharon_ and at A Change of Heart podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Angel Sharon. Have an amazing week, and until next time, don't forget,
Be whole, be healed, and be authentic.